Wonderful. We have all of our panelists. We have a few guests that have joined us. And I just want to say welcome to both of you. I'm so thrilled to have both of you here today to talk about something that's such an important topic for many of our clients. I was just saying to Emily prior to launching this webinar today that, I work with a lot of 50-something individuals. And they're starting to have these conversations with their parents. They're starting to have those conversations with their grandparents. And so they're starting to have these conversations with me too as a result of that. So I'm so thrilled to have both of you on. I know, Emily, you and I did a podcast not too long ago on this very topic. And I just felt like, we needed more time to cover this and to talk about it. And when I learned that one of the authors was your dad, who happens to be one of the co-panelists on the call today too, I said, do you think that, the two of you would come on and talk about it from this multi-generational perspective? So I want to pause there for a second and give each of you an opportunity to just introduce yourselves so that the listeners and participants can actually learn a little bit about maybe even why you decided to collaborate on this book together.
Amy, thanks so much for having Emily and me on this topic. And Emily says great things about you, so I'm looking forward to the conversation. And it's nice to see you. The genesis of this book, this is actually the third edition of the book. The first two editions I wrote with my sister, so this has been kind of an all-in-the-family story from the beginning. My sister Sharon had done a master's thesis at Stanford on what we now call auxiliary dwelling units, ADUs. And I said, Sharon, you got to turn that into a book. So we did that. She interviewed and I interviewed about 100 people around the country and around the world who are living in multi-generational households. And that's really the bricks of the book. The mortar is some of the statistics and cultural considerations around it and how it works in the United States and in other countries. For the third edition, well, unfortunately, 2 or 3 years ago, I guess it's 2.5 years ago now, my sister died, not from COVID, but it was during COVID. And so I wanted to continue her legacy. And so I asked Emily and a friend by the name of Angel Vargas to join the author team. And they each bring different perspectives on healthcare and particularly home care, which are becoming much more important topics now that us baby boomers are starting to fall apart. I am a baby boomer. And so the health considerations are hugely important. And from a financial planning standpoint, now is the time to start thinking about people my age are going to begin to fade away. Also, young people have health problems as well, but the big problem for the country right now is people my age. Mm-hmm. And so that's the genesis of the book. I'm so happy to continue the family tradition. And Emily has such a wonderful set of experiences to add, and I'll let her talk about that.
Yeah. So, yeah, thanks, Dad. And always good to be with you, Amy. And hi, everybody. This is a really cool project for us because I was the other day, my dad and I were at a book fair and I was thinking we were trying to engage people in talking about the book, but there was so many people there and, they were kind of passing by and I was wondering if it was fruitful for us to even be there. But then I thought to myself, well, gosh, I'm just hanging out with my dad. So, all of this to say, I love spending time with my dad. And so going in on a project with him and collaborating on this has been really, really wonderful because we get to spend more time in addition to the time we already spend. And, this is something to think about. There's my dad. This is something to think about. One of the things that we really emphasize here is just, shared creating solutions to the various issues that we have in society today. And this is one, the idea of multi-generational housing is one solution to the many situations that are going on in our society. And we also are very aware this is not some new idea that we created. We're very aware that if you just look back in history and look at other cultures throughout the world, multi-generational living is very normal and acceptable, and the way that people help each other within their family system. And our invitation is more of a, hey, let's bring this in as a renaissance of an idea. And as you know, Amy, many people are having, if they have kids that are trying to get out after college, and the cost of housing and, all the varying factors that are creating difficulty for people to be on their own, we're thinking, well, where is the one place that you're going to really find people behind you? And a lot of times that's in the family. So, partnering up with my dad and Angel, who unfortunately isn't here today, but his perspective was very important. My background, and what my contribution was to the book had to do with palliative and hospice, end of life care, and grief following the death of loved ones. And, not everyone ends up in that program, but we wanted to give people the understanding of what is offered to them in these programs that, past, if you have Medicare, it's covered by Medicare, the programs, all the assistance that can happen with that, how it can be helpful, sharing, important points of planning, et cetera. So that was the piece in which I contributed. And then the executive of home care for a big medical system is our third author, and he offers kind of the landscape on that. So you guys have a big picture now of the whole project and book. So I'll stop there, and Amy, let you.
Maybe I'll add a little bit about myself. My background is I've taught international marketing for 40 years at both USC and UCI. And so in that process of writing about that topic, I've learned a lot about how people live in other countries, and am always happy to make comparisons to how things are handled in other countries compared to here in the US, because there are good ideas in other places. And Emily hit the nail on the head. Human beings for 300,000 years have been living in multi-generational arrangements, starting with our far ancestors in Southern Africa. And we're basically designed as human beings to collaborate. The way we communicate with one another face to face and with language, we're designed to collaborate. And the last 50 years or so, we've gotten away from that a little bit in the United States with the notion of the
a lot of it, right?
Yeah. And so anyway, that's a little bit more about my background and what I bring to the party, so to speak.
Well, one of the things, and I told this to Emily when I was talking to her about the book, is one of the things that I love about it is it's sort of it's such a good resource, number one, but it bringing us back together. There's so many facets of that, right? So there is that level of independence, and I totally get it. I'm one of the most independent people. My mother always jokes and says she came out independent, right? So I'm one of the most independent people that you would ever know. But I know when my mother-in-law was very ill, one of her biggest concerns was, just going into a nursing home. Like, she just didn't want to go into a nursing home. She saw her siblings, she saw her mom, she saw the loneliness that they experienced. She saw the care that they experienced, or the lack and it wasn't that their fault. Like, the nursing homes are tight-shipped. They have limited resources. They can't sit there with you all day. So it wasn't like she was blaming anything, but she just didn't want that at the final stage of her life. And so she, repetitively begged us, please don't put us into a nursing home. And we were very fortunate to live close enough to her that when her journey for her end of life was starting to become very dominant in our family, we could rotate her care in her own. Like, we were close enough that we could go stay with her. We would rotate shifts, and so we kept her in her home. And her end of life transition was extremely peaceful because of that. And she wasn't stressed by the fact that she was by herself. And for us too, her situation was in the thick of COVID. Like she became ill in the center of COVID. And, there was going to be absolutely no way we were going to put her in a nursing home during that period of time. She wasn't going to die alone. Like that was against every being that we had. We were going to figure it out. But, I think a lot of people had the opposite happen where their family members were in nursing homes and they went through that journey by themselves or they were alone for 2 years. And so I think that this topic is really front and center to a lot of people's mind because of this time in the world, really, but also because it can start even earlier. Like we've had some families that are in their 40s that their parents are now moving at least closer. And in some cases, they're building like mother-in-law suites, as you want to call them, because the cost of childcare and the trust of childcare is becoming an issue. So, having your family unit closer so that that can actually happen and your family values are implemented. And yes, there can be outside, participation for education purposes, but a lot of families are starting to feel very uncomfortable with daycare, and the cost of daycare, like I said, has gotten so astronomical. So all of those things are just becoming more and more part of the conversation. And as a financial planner, there's the financial side, but then there's can I live with my parents that close to me again, or my grandparents that close to me again? And so the book, one of the things, and I think you can bounce around in it, right? The sections that are most important to you, but the book is an enormous resource. I was telling Emily before we jumped on, I'm like, okay, go read this section of the book. Like, go get this book and read this section. This is so applicable to your life right now. There might be other sections in and here's some talking points. Because where I see it go wrong is the unknown, the undiscussed, that I didn't know it was going to be like this, or I thought it was going to be like this. And that's where I see it go horribly wrong. And so by bringing the questions out that you brought out, and nobody's like saying, well, I thought like having those questions there to talk through, nobody's making an assumption that there was a problem. It's just a list of questions that we're going to make sure that we've all talked through. And so you don't have the emotion that can come with a question that didn't have an emotion, but there is a presumed emotion. We're a family unit. we're gonna put our own little spin on what that family baggage brings with it. And this book really just says, oh, okay, let's answer these questions. So everybody's on the same page. So I love, that's one of the reasons why I love the resource. And so I would love, to ask the question about, you're coming from different directions, right? You talked about marketing. And Emily, so John, you came from marketing. Emily, you're coming from palliative care. It's still caregiving, but palliative care. When you thought about coming back to the table and bringing Angel in as well and updating this book, was there something in your lives that said, we should do this now? This is something that is maybe within our best interest to have the conversation, or was it more an area of interest for you each?
Well, it's an area of interest for sure. For me, long-term interest. The first edition of the book was in 2007. And by the way, the other thing I didn't mention about how Sharon, my sister, and I got interested in the topic is we had a brother who was in assisted living and he died at age 45. And
wow.
So that's one of the first chapters is how to avoid nursing homes. And that was based on our experience there. But it was just time really to refresh the book, and things are changing. All the things we predicted back in 2007, the growth of multi-generational living has continued to move ahead quite fast. But the real thing that drives the problem right now is the retirement of baby boomers, and we're driving, as we've always done. I can speak from the baby boom generation. As we've always done, we're causing shortages again. So when I was a kid, there were shortages of bicycles, and when I started college, there was a shortage of college seats. And now there's a shortage of doctors and healthcare workers in the country. And if you're trying to get an appointment, it's really difficult. Emily's brother and my son, he's an endocrinologist in New York City, and he's basically 2 or 3 months out before he can see a new patient. And so we're causing this great shortage in those kinds of resources. And so it makes the whole story more urgent. And personally, we're doing okay. One of the things we say in the book is, if you're turning 70, you ought to think about where you want to end up, literally, because it's hard to move after you're 70. It's hard to create new friendships and all those kinds of things. And so everybody should start talking about this when the elder in the family is about 70. And so one way to use the book is to say, hey, Mom, you're 70 now, and these guys that wrote this book about it said we ought to start talking about this. So don't get mad at us, get mad at the authors.
Being able to push it off on somebody else always makes it a little easier, right?
That's right. And so I don't know how Emily feels about all this, because she is in a different generation and kind of more the sandwich kind of generation in some senses.
Yeah.
Don't let Emily
yeah. Well, yeah. A couple things, and I think I already kind of indicated one of my main drivers was just to do a project with my dad, was the first thing. But then, for me, it's like, if there was any way that I could share my experience and expertise that would help people and prevent them having, crises, that was what I was really interested in sharing about end of life care, palliative and hospice, and then grief. I mean, we are all part of a life arc. I mean, that is the reality, whether people want to admit it or not. It's like we serve in an arc and we live in an arc. And, so I know that the topic of like death and dying is, a lot of times people feel like, oh, does that mean I'm going to make it happen or anything like that? And it's like, no, if you're prepared and if you know about what's available to you, and if you have conversations with your family before you're hitting crises or before somebody's really sick, you're preventing a lot of stress on the system. And then you're able to make decisions based on those conversations and knowing what people want and need. So it's really meant to like serve as hope and a guide of like, this can be a good situation. It doesn't have to be negative. And we want to look at all the factors that can make it difficult and hard. And we talk about rules. We talk about communication in the book, relationships.
Hold that book up for a second, because I see it's in your hand. So there's the book, and you can get it on Amazon and some of the local places. And to your point, Emily, which I didn't mean, I kind of interrupted you a little bit, so I'm so sorry. But your point that I had a note that I wanted to make sure that we talked about this, because there are definitely pros and cons of this, right? And you mentioned just a moment ago that there's like things you need to be talking about. It's really important that you think about this. And so tell us a little bit about, again, you guys come from different angles. All three of you come from different angles. And I'm sure Sharon, when she, the original edition, she came from a different angle. You all have different perspectives. So when you were coming up with some of these questions to ask, I'd love to I'd love to just hear your mindset behind starting the conversation. That is the hardest place, is to start the conversation. Now, I love John's response of this guy that said that when you're 70, you need to start having this conversation. So I want to start having this conversation. But some families can do that. Other families, you need to have different angles and perspectives. And I'd love to know, like, as you guys have been out promoting this book, have you heard of other ways that people have brought this topic to the surface?
I guess the unfortunate way this comes up of if somebody has a health problem, that could be an injury, a slip and fall, or it could be some disease. And people start thinking ahead, where is this going and what are the possibilities? But that's the worst circumstance. In the book, we share a list from AARP that talks about starting this conversation. And they go through a number of different ways. Another way to start the conversation is to have a third party bring it up. Maybe someone from the clergy or a good family friend. But those are all different ways to start the conversation. The other key about having the conversation is getting everybody in the family involved. As I mentioned, I didn't mention, I had 4 siblings and we get along pretty well, but it's good to have a lot of siblings when your parents are having problems, but you need to talk to everybody and try to sort out what each kid can offer to the system, so to speak. And so it's important to involve everybody. Ideally, you want to get to a neutral location. You don't want to do it in somebody's home, maybe at a picnic or a restaurant or at a temple or church or whatever. And that way, that helps get around the parent-child part of it. Now, when Emily says anything, I listen very carefully because I'm such a good parent. And she's laughing right now. But anyway, you need to get away from that kind of hierarchical problem in a family and another place to do it. But anyway, we have a chapter on that topic, starting the conversation. And I mean,
Amy, so Amy, you and I think are the same generation, same age. I think we've decided. And I don't know about you, but I'm having all kinds of friends coming to me now with issues of their parents, of, and also just, we already hit the topic with talking to people by the time they're like 70. My own mother, my dad and mom are divorced many years. And my own mom has been in a rural, like a very small town, very remote town far from us. And she's been talking about leaving there for a long time. And since she started talking about it, she's lost a lot of her friends, and even the job she was kind of diminished and is gone away. So she's now in this remote place, no community, no work, in her mid 70s. And finally we got her, closer to us. But it took a lot, and it was really hard for her. And I think that's why we say, when we can have these conversations when we're all well, a perfect place is with financial planning, because you're talking about planning, right? And this is about trying to plan. We're not going to know how to meet every need that we don't see coming towards us, but we can kind of get the framework of it and the house up, the framework, and then fill in as needed. And it is important to assess, and this might, to assess the family system and who's capable of what, who's available, who has resources financially, who has time. Those are all ways to contribute in a system. And the reason why we emphasize the family is because, our systems that we pay taxes to, they can't meet all the needs. They don't meet all the needs. The family is really the place you'll get your needs met emotionally, spiritually, financially. So I'll stop, there, but it's really just, it's kind to have these conversations for anyone in the system.
I love that you use the word kind, because I really think that's where people are coming from, is a place of love and kindness, to make sure that you and I have talked in the past, Emily, about raising parents, that sandwich generation, that raising parents generation. And many of us in the X generation, who I affectionately have deemed the forgotten generation, are starting to get to that point where we're, quote unquote, raising parents a little bit. And it might be minimal in nature, just little things that we're doing, but it gets to the point where we're having to make significant amounts of time. And you brought this up, and, remembering that this needs to be entered at from a place of kindness and love, and accepted on both sides, because there are things about our parents that drove us nuts when we were, younger. And there are things about our parents that are going to drive us nuts as we get older too. But there's things about us that drive them nuts at the same time. And so coming from a place of kindness is really important. And John, I know you laughed when I said that, because you're probably thinking, yeah, that's true, right?
I was thinking of the old saying that insanity is hereditary. You get it from your kids.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. One of the things that I loved, and I've read several times, and Emily knows that I ordered like 10 copies of this book when it came out, because I wanted to have it available on my bookshelf to be able to hand to people when these conversations came up. And I wanted my own copy as well. But the practicalities chapter part 3, that particular section is really, I think, so helpful. Not that other sections aren't, but that particular part is so helpful, because it is about there's the discussion around deciding to live together. There's several pages in there that talks about the privacy side, the proximity and the privacy side of things, because that's always the fear that I hear. Like, that independence that we talked about initially, my independence and my parents' independence, is really important on both sides. And when parents my experience is, when parents start to lose their independence, they fight back. Just like kids, when they're starting to gain their independence, start to fight back. The similarities are very clear to me. Like, when I'm sitting in the middle and I'm seeing it, it's easy to see. But when you're in the thick of it, you're participating in it, you don't necessarily see that you're both fighting for fierce independence in different ways. And it goes, no, please speak, because I was going to ask, what are your thoughts around that?
One of the key points in the book about multi-generation is a couple of key points. One is it doesn't work for everybody. Mm-hmm. Some personalities just can't get along. But one of the things we found in doing the research is this issue of privacy and proximity, and trying to find the right balance. And so we talked to builders, and some of the builders now are good at that, and some not so well. So I live in Irvine, interestingly. And some of the builders around here have added what they call granny flats or artist studios, but they put them upstairs. So that's just such a bad idea. But other builders are really good, where they consciously put a separate entrance in and put a separate kitchen facility. And we know from talking to so many people that the kitchen is often the battleground. It's obvious why, because that's where everybody crosses paths, in the kitchen. And so having separate kitchens, having the hardware right can make a difference. And separate entrances is important. I mean, I am happily married now, but if I were a single old guy, maybe I would like to have a date over, and it'd be nice if I didn't have to parade her or him through the rest of the house. So this idea of privacy is just crucial. And in my own planning, I about 10 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago, I told the kids when we were doing the first edition of the book, I have 4 kids. I just told them when I get decrepit, which I'm on my way fast, I'll be living with one of them. And I just don't know which one yet. But I'm planning on being a burden. Actually, the minister in our church pointed out one time that we're designed to be a burden as we get older. And so we have a.
So are the kids fighting over you at this point in time?
I don't know. I have a couple of other books that are intended to bring grandparents and grandkids closer together. That are kids' books, and one of them is called The Great Squirrel Burglar. The artist in the book is my sister, so it's another case of working with family members. But the 2 main characters, one is a grandfather squirrel, and he can't remember where he stashed his nuts and acorns. So the grandson squirrel is assigned to help him. And that's a metaphor for a lot of different ways. I was talking with a fellow that works with foster kids recently, and the idea came up to possibly connect foster kids to elders in the neighborhood, and they can provide different kinds of help. The younger kids can help with the computer, and maybe the elders can help with a little bit of wisdom.
Yeah. Well, I love that idea, John, because one of the things that's very common in the X generation, if you do some research on this, you'll find is many of us did not have children.
Yes.
For whatever reason, that is statistically true for the X generation. And I actually didn't know that, except I started noticing a pattern with many of my clients that are my age, like myself, like Emily, that just don't have children. And it was, for many of us, a very conscious choice. I think that was our fierce independence at some point in time, and then just made the decision that that's the life that we were going to live. So when you talk about, you were saying, I'm going to be a burden for those of us that don't have children. We don't have that choice. Well, I suppose we could think about, the fostering program that you're talking about. We might be able to offer some wisdom, and they would be able to have a loving, welcoming home that they could help with the technology side, or even the transportation side, or the companionship side of things. So I would love to hear your opinion, if you have one, either of you, if when you've worked with people or talked to people that don't have that family unit that they could even have under one roof.
Yeah.
I will tell a quick story, then I'll let Emily provide a much better answer than I know she will. One of the people we talked to, a couple, they were teachers, and they had this is in Northern California, they had a condo near the beach, and they used to have other teachers, they would have them staying over the weekends when they weren't there. And so that kind of built a community around this condominium and teachers. And that's just one kind of idea. But Emily, please.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the opening of the book is actually my story, which has to do with not having children. And I really wanted kids. I wanted a partner. I wanted kids. And that wasn't what occurred and has occurred for me. I'm probably not going to have kids. I'm still holding hope for the partner. But, I've done a lot of the way I met that, because throughout my development as a woman and, as an adult and trying to have that type of life occur, it didn't happen. So I'd have to do other things to meet some of my social needs. So I found myself joining different groups of people with different areas of interest. So like I'm part of a philosophy group. we meet once a week. And then I'm part of a songwriting group and we meet once a week. And they're like little communities for me of like, for lack of a better word, to share the burden of life, because on your own, you have different decision making you have to do. And so by being parts of different groups, it helps kind of spread that. And we felt it was important to include my story because, like your point, there are many of us that don't have anyone behind us. So it's like, what's going to happen when we get older? And there's a lot of people talking about creative communities. There's all kinds of things popping up. And I think it's to meet this need. It's like, can people share a piece of property and put little dwellings on it, or tiny homes, or
tiny homes,
so it's going into this. And the book is called Under One Roof, Creating Harmony for Multi-Generational Living. But the piece is about creativity and being creative with who those people might be. It might not be family. Some people don't have family. So it's like, what's your chosen family? What are your friend groups? What are you part of? Thinking out, being big picture and thinking on a bigger scale. And I'll just stop because I think you might have something to say.
No, I love that you're bringing in that chosen family. Like that's the terminology that I love, because I did, I know your story. I read your story as well. And I guess I just wanted to call that out because, like I said, statistically, and John nodded his head when I said it, the X generation, for whatever reason, we just didn't, whether it's that we didn't find the partner that we wanted and didn't get the children that we wanted, or whether we made that conscious decision, or for whatever reason it was, as a generation, we are very interestingly childless compared to like the baby boomer generation and even the millennial generation. So I think that it's important to include in this conversation, not just the blood family, but that extended family that you might find. And John, I have to say, I love the idea of the fostering, because to me, that is really bringing together two very, was it Gran Torino that Clint Eastwood, was that the name of that movie where he sort of did that quasi, right? I mean, totally different scenario, but as I'm thinking about it, like that's actually what he did, right? He brought a young kid in and sort of fostered him, for lack of a better term, and the kid helped him and he helped the kid.
Go ahead.
No, please.
I hadn't thought about that movie, but you're exactly right. And I'm glad you brought that up. But that makes me think of another quick story about policy. And when ADUs start to come into neighborhoods, the first objection is parking. And so my response to that is, okay, so you care more about your Grand Prix than your grandmother. That's what you're telling me. And the policymakers use that excuse of what about parking all the time? And it just kind of makes me crazy. No. The other thing on your topic, when we were writing the book, we ran into an article by Paula Spann at the New York Times. She in the title used the word kinless Americans. And we thought the article was so good that we paid to have it reprinted in our book. And so that's another view of things. She gives a lot of statistics and things like that. And I should say, one of the other motivations for this book was just looking at the demographics. We could see the baby boomers coming. The fall off in fertility is happening worldwide. I mean, it's not just you guys, it's happening worldwide. And that's making our social system design. If you think about Medicare and Social Security, they were designed when we had a lot of young people supporting a lot of older people in a population pyramid type of scheme. And that was in the 40s and the 60s. Now we don't have population pyramids. We have a lot of old people like me that are retired and having problems, and there just aren't as many younger people. The other thing that contributed to this demographic issue is the new longevity, although that's faded a little bit the last couple of years. But people are living longer, they're having fewer kids, and then you throw in baby boomers. I guess we have to blame Adolf Hitler for that problem, since he created World War II, and thus the ripple effect. Anyway.
No, I think we have kind of the hourglass shape of population. I mean, not the bottom part of the hourglass being smaller, but you have the baby boomers that are being supported by these two separate components, if you want to say. But the bigger income earners right now, which is that X generation, there's not as many with that particular group than there is the millennial generation. And so millennial generation is bigger, equivalent to the baby boomer generation, but their income isn't supporting the upper generation. So we're having that problem. And as you mentioned, the Social Security and Medicare, when they were developed, people's life expectancies were not anywhere near what they are now. We were looking at people going on Medicare at 65, and they might be on it for 7 years. Now we have people on Medicare for 25 to 30 years, right?
I hope you're right.
I mean, the average age, I do not remember where it was, a conference that I was at, but I took a screenshot of this, and they said the average age of an individual that works with a financial planner consistently is 90 years old. That's the life expectancy, not the average age, sorry. The life expectancy of somebody who works with a financial planner is 90 years old. And I looked at my colleague that was sitting next to me, and I'm like, see, this is why we plan to 100, because this is important to hear these kind of statistics, because some people will say, oh, I'll never live to 90. And then when I heard that the average life expectancy for somebody working with a financial planner is 90, that's the average. So that means that there's those outliers and there's those underliers, but there's those outliers too. And that's why it's so important. And if you think about living to, even 95 or 100, and you retire at 55 or even 65, you have a lot of living to do in those years. And the question that I will often ask my younger retirees that are getting to that 60, because I look at 65 now and think, oh my gosh, you have all these years in front of you, because some of my clients are in their 80s and 90s. What do you want to spend and commit your time and energy to? And, so many of them are like, well, I'd love to travel and I'd love to do this. In my early years, so Emily may have told you, but I break down retirement in sort of 3 stages. I talk about the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. So those kind of 3 phases. And so in those go-go years, they want to be out, they want to be doing things. That independence is extremely important, but they've got this burden that we talk about, this asset that is not generating any income for that, and that's their home. It is just sitting there, and it's a safety place, but it's just sitting there, earning 0 for them. Now it gives them safety, soundness, security, all of those kinds of things. But what if they were to unload this burden, because they want to travel, they want to do all these things, and they combine resources to have this suite or this separate entity that's very close by. And now they literally can go, and sort of have that plan in place for when the slow go starts to sit in.
Yeah.
So now the slow go starts to sit in. You're around, the kids are around, maybe you're helping with the grandkids a little bit, but if you need a second set of ears for different doctor's appointments, or, you're still going, but you just need that level of protection that just, and when I say protection, that's those years that I'm just not moving as fast, but I'm still mentally competent. I'm still good, but just not moving quite as fast. And they are susceptible, that group is a little bit susceptible to some of the scams and some of the things that are out there. often it's a lack of technology understanding. I'm not saying always, but and then when you get into those no-go years, that's when a physical safety mechanism kicks into place. So, but now you've had the opportunity to like slowly get into this, because if you're going, then you're not there all the time anyways. And you don't have that, like kind of adjustment period. And I'm doing this because, there is that sort of adjustment period that can sometimes occur. And so, as I was reading through the book, I kind of kept that in my mind. And even under the financial and legal considerations sections, which is my get, right? I just kept putting that in the forefront of my mind, thinking, if I can present this to clients in a way that I don't want to force anybody to do anything that they don't want to do, of course, but bringing that section into the place after they've thought about all of the other things that are in the book, now I can say to them, how we talk about the go, the slow go, and the no go? Here's how we can make that happen. If you're okay with everything else, if everything else fits, here's how we can make that happen. So I just want to say thank you so much. And Emily, I don't know if you wanted to add to that particular,
No, just yeah, as you can see, we can talk about this in so many different ways. So it's just a topic that I think will continue. And, we're both available for emails, or if anyone has questions, we can share our information, and we just say, this is a good gift too. I mean, it's a, it's a way to get people to start thinking about it. And it's not so, forced. It's giving them an opportunity.
And
I want to say, John, please go ahead.
Yeah, just one last comment. I mean, the good news, well, a couple of things. One is, as you were talking about, and I'm going to use this, the go, slow go, and no go. I'm going to use that. I'll give you credit.
Perfect.
But that goes back to Emily's arc. You can do some things at some parts of life, and we ought to be thinking about that. What does the next 5 years look like? And I'm being an old guy, and I've lost my other thought.
It's because I interrupted
come back
you.
later. But anyway, it's the idea of giving it as a gift. Yes. Oh, I know what the point was. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
And now I've forgotten it again.
We were talking about
It'll
gifts.
come back as soon as I stop talking.
No, we were talking about the gift. You said the gift, and then you said, I know what it was. Does that bring it back?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'll try to.
Well, we can. Yeah. So I was just going to say, we're about 52 minutes in. So, just any final thoughts that you both have. I want to say thank you so much. This is such an important topic, I think, in our society today. It's such an important topic in people's health when it comes to mental and financial. I so appreciate you, the work that you've done on this book. And for me, it's such a resource that I can use not only as a person, but as a planner. And, I keep pulling all these little tidbits because it's hard to retain everything that you read and everything that you see. And I keep going back to this book and pulling little tidbits out of it. And I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for all the work that went into this and for putting this resource out there. I've read a lot of books, and I have to say this is one of the best, most practical books that I've read on this topic. And I'm not just saying that, I truly mean it from the bottom of my heart. So thank you so much from, the perspective of somebody who has gone through pieces of it, but sees other people struggling with it. This is such a gift to the world. So thank you so much. And I'd love to hear any final thoughts that you have as we wrap this up.
Well, maybe I'll finish with one of my favorite stories. There was a family living, I think, in Colorado, and the mother-in-law moved in with her son and the granddaughter. And initially they were having kitchen problems. And they solved the kitchen problem by building an ADU in the back. They had enough land, not like California, but they could put an accessory dwelling unit in the back. And once they got that in, then they had a separate kitchen, then everything became really nice. And then it even got nicer because of a little software thing they did. They had the granddaughter take the mail out every day to the grandmother, and that helped their bonding. Also, she could basically report whether grandma was still okay. But just that little house rule, so to speak, helped with the bonding. And so that's one of my favorite stories of not only it involves the hardware, which is an important consideration, but the house rules as well. But thank you very much for inviting us and saying such nice things about the book. We really appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just finish by saying we talked a lot about like all the practicalities and all the things to think about. But, you know, he just finished with the story about the relational piece. And we didn't give a ton of time to that, but this is also about connection and building relationships. And, you know, after the pandemic, I mean, I see it in across the spectrum of age range because I work a crisis hotline. And, you know, what the pandemic did to our connections, to the comfortability with connection, socialization, all of that, you know, there was a great interruption in the development for everyone. So this is just a way to try and bring people back together again in a time where it's desperately needed. So that's all I'll say. And I'll thank you too, Amy, and the listeners. And like I said, if we can answer any questions, we'll be available. And we hope the book, wrong way, upside down. We hope it helps. The intention. Thank you, Aunt Sharon. And, you know, from the bottom of our heart, we thank her for bringing this idea to the forefront.
I think we should.
I do think. Oh, please, John, go ahead.
I think we should finish with a story about chocolate chip cookies.
Please, go ahead.
So, in doing different editions of this book, in the last edition, the second edition, there's a lot of things happening with robots and automation, particularly in Japan. And this was going to be one of the solutions to the elderly problem. And they're about 10 years ahead of us with that. And I was, in a sense, pleased to hear that a lot of those innovations that are developing in Japan aren't being utilized, because the relationships Emily was talking about is important, and you lose that with the machines and the robots and all that. And the key thing is, you know, you can't smell chocolate chip cookies being cooked unless your grandmother, or in my case, your grandfather, is in the house cooking them. And so that's an important thing to remember, the cookies.
That is so true. Well, I hope that you get to smell cookies, Emily. I hope that that is a part of your life. I certainly miss it from my grandparents. That's something that once it's gone, right? There's the memory, but the smell is never going to be the same because it's from a different location. And it's a great memory to have. And again, just thank you so much to both of you for participating today, for writing the book. And we will have information about the book in the show notes of the webinar when it's released and published. We'll have your contacts information. Emily, you mentioned if people want to reach out to you, so we'll stick that contact information in there, so that people can specifically reach out to you with any questions they might have. And we'll also have a link to the book that's available on Amazon. So if you want to order it, you can go ahead and do that as well. Well worth it. Like I mentioned, I have my own copy and I have little flags in it so that when clients are having their own issues, I can just open it to that section, say, this is what I read. You might want to have get your own book and, have it for your own reference. So we'll have all that information available for anybody that wants it. And again, thank you so much to both of you for participating today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.